Most people assume that by now, every corner of this planet has been mapped, contacted, and accounted for, that the phrase uncontacted belongs in history books, not in the present tense. Papua New Guinea says otherwise. In 2008, an Indonesian aerial survey team flying over the Foja Mountains photographed a valley showing no trails, no settlements, no trace of human presence whatsoever. A year later, a BBC Natural History Unit expedition dropped into that same interior and catalogued more than 40 species never before recorded by science in a matter of weeks. But the team came back with something else too, an account they could not classify, something their own local guides refused to discuss in detail and warned them never to go looking for. By the end of this video, you will understand why Papua New Guinea is not just biologically unmapped. Parts of it remain, in the truest sense of the word, unknown. Papua New Guinea occupies the eastern half of the island of New Guinea, 462,000 square kilometers of terrain, so vertically extreme that valleys sitting only a few kilometers apart can remain functionally isolated from each other, separated by ridgelines that no road has ever crossed. The interior highlands climb above 4,500 meters. Below them, the lowland rainforest is dense enough that in many regions, aerial survey remains the only practical way to know what is actually down there. Serious outside attention to the interior accelerated after the Second World War, when aerial reconnaissance began revealing populated valleys that no colonial government had ever recorded. The most striking case came in 1938, when Richard Archbold's expedition flew over what maps described as empty jungle, and instead found tens of thousands of people living in an organized agricultural society, completely unknown to the outside world until that moment. If a population that size went undetected until an aircraft happened to pass overhead, the question of what else might still be sitting undetected is not a hypothetical one. And in the decades since, expeditions returning from the deepest stretches of that interior have brought back more than new species. They have brought back accounts that science still has not fully addressed. Mystery number 1, the Foja Mountains Lost World. 2005, in December 2005, a team of American, Indonesian, and Australian scientists led by Bruce Baylor of Conservation International dropped by helicopter into a swampland, clearing deep in the Foja Mountains of Papua, the Indonesian-administered western half of New Guinea, by every indication available to them. No trails, no fire scars, no clearings, no human being had ever stood on that ground before. The Wolka Range had appeared on maps for decades. It had never once been the subject of a ground-based biological survey. No rivers ran through it that could carry a boat. No overland route existed that could carry a person. The terrain had sealed itself. Within the first hours on the ground, the team filmed a Balepshi's six-wired bird of paradise, performing a courtship display that had never once been documented on camera. Local mammals showed no reaction to the researchers at all. They approached directly. That is not ordinary wildlife behavior. That is the behavior of animals that have never learned, at any point across their evolutionary history, to fear a human being. Baylor's team proposed the obvious explanation: total isolation, sustained for thousands of years, with no resource valuable enough to draw in hunting parties from the surrounding lowlands. But when researchers later spoke with the Cuerba and Papasina communities living at the base of the range, the answer they got back did not match that explanation. The communities knew the area existed. They had always known, and they described it as a place their own oral tradition told them never to enter. Not because of the terrain, because of what they said lived there. The Foja expedition is remembered today for the species it catalogued. It is barely remembered for the warning it received and never followed up on, because the next discovery did not stay quiet nearly that long. Mystery number 2, the Foja giant rat. In 2009, the BBC Natural History Unit returned to the broader Foja Mountains region while filming the series Lost Land of the Volcano. One night, a camera crew caught movement near their equipment that made several of them assume, for a few seconds, that they were looking at a small dog. It was a rat. Papua New Guinea has a long history with what biologists call island gigantism, Isolated populations growing far larger than their mainland relatives, once predators and competitors. Drop out of the picture, giant rat species had already been documented on the island, with descriptions going back to the 1970s. None of that prepared the crew for this one. The accompanying scientific team measured the animal at approximately 82 centimeters from nose to tail, roughly 5 times the length of a common rat. It showed no fear of the infrared camera traps. It approached the equipment directly, under direct light, the way an animal behaves when it has simply never had a reason to be afraid of anything standing on 2 legs. Researchers classified it within the Malamys genus, consistent with other giant rat species already known from the island, and proposed that extreme isolation had allowed this particular population to grow undisturbed for an extended stretch of time. Then the genetic samples came back. They did not cleanly match any previously catalogued Malamys population on the island. Either this was an entirely new species or a population that had been cut off long enough to genetically diverge on a timeline that did not line up cleanly with the existing fossil record for the genus. Nobody has gone back to resolve which one it is. A giant rat, unafraid of humans, is unusual enough. But the next discovery on this list was not an animal at all. It was an entire civilization, 50,000 people, hiding inside a mountain range that the rest of the world had written off as mystery number 3. The Grand Valley in 1938. Naturalist Richard Archbold led an American Museum of Natural History expedition into the highlands of Dutch New Guinea aboard a Catalina flying boat. At the time, one of the largest aircraft to ever operate in the region. The crew expected unbroken jungle below them. Instead, they saw smoke rising in columns from what looked, even from altitude, like an enormous cultivated valley. Every map available to that expedition showed nothing in that location. No missionary record, no colonial survey, no prior account from any source had indicated that anyone lived there. As far as the outside world was concerned, it was empty wilderness, the same as everything around it. When the team descended, they found an organized agricultural society of an estimated 50,000 people, the Dani, living across a network of villages, irrigated fields, and fortified compounds. They had no idea that a world existed beyond the mountain ridges surrounding their valley. Non-anthropologists later proposed that the valley's near total enclosure by ridgelines over 4,000 meters high had kept the population isolated for potentially thousands of years, long enough to develop and sustain an entire functioning society with zero outside contact. Then the carbon dating came in on the agricultural terracing. Organized farming had been taking place in that valley for over 7,000 years. A population larger than entire contemporary nations had existed, completely unknown to the rest of the species, for longer than most of recorded human history put together. If 50,000 people went unnoticed for 7,000 years, the real question is not whether the Grand Valley was unusual, it is whether it was actually alone. The dead question did not stay theoretical, because in the decades since, stolen and strange epochs of the unknown have kept surfacing across that same interior, and not all of them have been human. Mystery number 4, the Goliath bird eater's smaller, stranger cousin. During that same 2009 BBC expedition into the Foja range, a separate camera team working at a different elevation photographed something that, on playback, several crew members initially mistook for a small animal crossing in front of the lens. It was a spider. The accompanying entomologist put its leg span at close to 30 centimeters. Large spiders are not news in Papua New Guinea. Giant huntsman species and oversized orb weavers are well documented across the island's lowland forests, and scientists working there are rarely surprised by scale alone. The were surprised by this one specifically. Its coloration did not match, its leg structure did not match. Entomologists who reviewed the footage afterward could not confidently assign it to any catalogued genus on the island. Not huntsman, not orb, weaver, not tarantula. The leading theory, proposed by arachnologists who studied the footage frame by frame, suggested an undocumented regional variant within Heteropoda, the huntsman genus already established in New Guinea. A reasonable guess, reasonable and unprovable. No physical specimen was ever collected. The animal moved off camera and into leafleting, before anyone could reach it, and visual identification of spider species at the genus level without a specimen in hand is something arachnologists openly admit is unreliable. An animal that size does not vanish into leaf litter without a trace. It has to be somewhere. And in the years since that footage was filmed, no expedition has gone back to that exact elevation, in that exact season. To look again, a spider that resists classification is strange enough to sit with for a while. But the next entry on this list is not something a camera caught by accident. It is something local communities have been describing by name for generations and warning outsiders about ever since the warnings started being written down. Mystery number 5, the Ropen reports of Umboi Island on Umboi Island off the northern coast of Papua New Guinea. Local communities have described a large nocturnal flying creature for generations. They call it the Ropen. Witnesses describe a wingspan reaching several meters, a low hunting flight over shallow coastal water at night, and something stranger than either of those details, a faint glow visible as it moves. In 1994, missionary and amateur researcher Jonathan Whitcomb began formally collecting these accounts. Over the following decade, he compiled testimony from dozens of named residents across multiple villages on the island who had never coordinated their stories with each other. Village elders interviewed during that period were consistent on one point: the Ropen accounts predate any outside contact with Umboi at all. This is not a story that arrived with missionaries or traders. It was already there. The bioluminescent detail is what stops most biologists who hear about it. Witnesses interviewed separately, with no contact between them, described the same low glow during flight over water. No known bat, bird, or flying reptile in that region produces or reflects light in that way. Biologists who have reviewed the testimony have proposed the most reasonable available explanation: an undocumented species of flying fox, since Papua New Guinea is already home to some of the largest bat species on the planet, observed under conditions such as disturbed phosphorescent algae that created the illusion of a glow. Flying foxes do not hunt fish, and nothing about disturbed algae explains a glow that witnesses describe as moving with the animal, not beneath it. 4 decades of testimony, not one photograph, not one recording, not a single physical specimen. Just witnesses who keep coming forward, telling the same story, with nothing to gain from it. A single uncorroborated account is easy to dismiss as folklore. It gets harder to dismiss once you see how many separate, unconnected communities across that island chain describe the exact same behavior in the exact same detail, decade after decade. What separates this final entry from everything before? It is not one more creature, one more valley, one more unresolved sighting. It is the size of what remains unexamined. In the 2010s, satellite mapping conducted by Conservation International and the University of Papua identified at least a dozen additional valley systems across the island's interior, sharing the same isolation characteristics as the Foja Range and the Grand Valley terrain, enclosed enough, remote enough, unsurveyed enough that researchers conducting the analysis could not rule out the presence of further uncontacted communities, undocumented species, or both, sitting inside terrain that technology had only just learned how to see clearly. That finding was never widely publicized. The teams behind it were focused on biodiversity, mapping for conservation purposes, not on the human or biological implications buried inside their own data. It sat in technical reports. It did not make headlines. If even 1 or 2 of those identified valleys contain anything close to what the Grand Valley contained in 1938, an entire undiscovered society or a population of something presumed extinct or never catalogued at all, it would represent one of the most significant findings of the century, anthropological or biological. Researchers involved have been careful with their language. Satellite imagery can suggest seclusion. It cannot confirm what or who is living inside it. That distinction matters, and serious scientists have held to it. But here is the detail that does not sit easily alongside that caution. The majority of those valley systems identified more than a decade ago have never had a single ground expedition funded or conducted since. The technology to find these places has existed for years, so has the data pointing directly at them. Almost no one has gone back to look. Every discovery in this video shares the same origin story. The rat, the spider, the 50,000 people in the Grand Valley, the testimony from Umboi. None of it was found by someone looking for it on purpose. An aircraft happened to fly overhead. A camera crew was there for something else entirely. A missionary stayed long enough to start listening. Papua New Guinea has not run out of secrets. It has run out of people willing to go looking for them deliberately, instead of stumbling into them by accident. The last truly unmapped places on Earth are not history. They are still out there, right now, still unintered. Which of these 7 discoveries do you think's almost overdue for a real follow-up expedition? Cryptic Finds will be watching for the answer.